Do you embrace the thing that you are?
Right.
And, love the qualities that make you you. I remember that the door opened and she was teaching. She was in the middle of the room. She was sitting on the floor. I'll never forget it. And I was like, ugh. Like it just like took my breath away. And I remember going to my mom and I was like, this is it.
Yes.
Whatever you're asking about,
right.
This is like where I need to be.
How do you navigate the different power dynamics and creative languages of each role?
Okay, here it is.
It's me, Tracy, and when I get on the mic, you know we about to have a good time tonight. Real talk, real growth, that's a fact. So go ahead now, sit back and relax. Hanging with us, you'll see that nothing is impossible, because together we become unstoppable. You know that taking action is the objective, so get ready for the Breakthrough Collective.
This is the Breakthrough Collective, where your story matters, your courage counts, and your next chapter starts now. I am thrilled to welcome someone who spent her entire career redefining what's possible both on the stage and behind the scenes. Ioana Alfonso, she began her journey at just 15 years old as an assistant to legendary choreographer Mia Michaels, and has since evolved into a Broadway performer, a visionary director, and a Tony Award-winning producer. Io has navigated the entertainment industry not just as a performer, but as a leader who uses her platform to create opportunities for others. From sharing the stage with celebrities to working on organizations like Artists Striving to End Poverty, Io's career is a perfect example of the way that true artistry isn't just about performance. It's about vision, leadership, and using your gifts to create lasting impact. Io,
Hey,
welcome to the Breakthrough Collective.
Thanks for having me.
And I always say Io. I never say Ioana, but I said it correctly, right?
Yes.
I love it.
People who call me Ioana either don't know me or are really mad at me. Like
okay.
My mom.
Your mom.
She uses my full name when she means business.
So getting down to it.
Yeah. So Io is
business. Good. Speaking of business, let's dive right in, okay?
Yes.
So, and speaking of your name, because you describe yourself as being most known for your unusual name and your big hair, right?
Yeah.
So in an industry obsessed with image and perception, what does it mean to lead with the things that make you different rather than trying to fit a traditional mold?
It's interesting. That's sort of that statement that's in my bio is I should probably change it because it's a carryover from like many, many, many years ago.
Okay.
When it was unusual to have big hair.
Yeah.
And be in any way sort of not in a particular box. I think that luckily we have a long way to go, but luckily that has shifted. I remember in my younger years as a performer always debating, like, do I wear my hair curly? Do I wear it straight? Those questions were much more present than they are now. It's like cool to have curly hair now, and you see it like more often.
And when you were asking yourself to wear it straight, was it to fit in or was it just another?
Oh, that's a whole other podcast.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, in a way, yes, right? I think that it goes all the way back to, growing up in the islands where that's slowly shifting too, but, not to get too deep, like too fast, but it's a carryover from, colonialism. Like, it's a carryover from trying to be more upper class, more accepted, more, it's a survival mechanism in a way to sort of look more, European in a way. And so.
And not to stand out so much.
Right. And so when I was younger, it was always about, people still do it. Are you going to the salon and getting your hair straightened? In the Dominican Republic, you go once a week.
Right.
In Puerto Rico, it's a little bit different. And I lived in both places. And so it's been a constant question of like, do you embrace the thing that you are?
Right.
And, love the qualities that make you you, or do you listen to sort of the noise that tells you, oh no, this is the way for, and that's, like I said, like super layered. It's not just the business.
Right.
But you mentioned Mia earlier. She was the very first one at a very young age to make me feel like that was something I should embrace. And she used to actually brush my hair out to do like different projects or different, pieces. And it was always so startling, but also so empowering. And I feel really lucky.
Brush it out to make it fuller?
To make it bigger.
Yeah.
So like at a time when I was trying to make it smaller and straighter and more controlled.
And she was like, no, Miss Honey, we're not doing that.
No, she was like, it's gorgeous, it's beautiful, I love it. And so I feel like that statement in my bio was born out of that sort of support early on. And so when I first started in my career, it was something that made me different. And it was, on one hand, working. So I kept it, right?
Yeah.
And then the name is just something, that's always been a thing. Like, it gets mispronounced, it gets misspelled. It's like always a thing. And so people are always like, Ioana, Ioana. So it's always been a thing. So.
Got it.
Yeah.
So what's the moment, and is that the moment when you realize in your career, when you realize that your Latina roots weren't something to navigate around, but to accept and embrace it, and something to lead with?
Yeah. It's interesting. I feel like I've never really, for better or for worse, led with that sort of filter until recently. And part of it is that I didn't really grow up in an environment that kind of created questions around it. It was just something that, like, I was, right? So I grew up in Puerto Rico until I was about 11-ish, 11, 12. And then I moved to Miami. And if you've ever been to either of those places, people are just
living their best
Latino.
lives.
So like, it wasn't really anything. And then my family isn't a family that is necessarily looking at the world from an advocacy or a specific filter around our ethnicity. It was just something that we embraced, that we were. And it's not that I wasn't aware of it or that I didn't, celebrate it or that, but just that, like, and so it's not until much later in my life, and I can't really pinpoint a moment because I feel like it happened very gradually, and certainly in the last couple of years, it's just truly accelerated. Right. And then once I started to see the filter or experience what my, I guess, the consequences of my choices are, that's when I started to really say, oh, okay, well, I can make choices that shape the impact that I have and also support the things that I believe that I'm about and how I want to lead. And so that's been clearer in the last, I would say 5 to 10 years progressively.
Okay.
And yeah.
And so how did you end up in Puerto Rico? Because you're Dominican, or
I'm a little bit of a mutt. I was born here in New York City, and I was born here because my dad is very artistic, a lover of New York, a dreamer. He considers New York this like very sort of like the pinnacle of art and artists and culture. Being from the Dominican Republic, he's an artist himself. He's sort of like a master of many things. He's an inventor and a creative person and a writer, and he was really well known in the Dominican Republic for a really long time.
That's where you get it from.
Yeah, and he would get stopped on the streets. He was like a little bit of a celebrity. Well, a lot of a celebrity, if I'm honest. And so when I came along, when my mom became pregnant, he was like, oh, well, she needs to be born in New York because she's going to be. He was convinced I was going to be a painter. And so he was like, well, she needs to be born there. She's got to have that like energy. And so we had cousins that lived here and, he had her come up and, so I was born here, but then I moved back to the Dominican Republic where they were living. And then I think maybe around 2 years or so, I actually don't really know, but around there, there was my parents got divorced, and so there was a shift, and my mom ended up moving to Puerto Rico to be where my grandparents were, and so I lived there with her. So I would I would travel back and forth between the DR and Puerto Rico for a really long time, like half and half on both islands. But my mom's family is actually French, and my dad's family is Sephardic Jew from the southern part of Spain.
Got it. So it's just a lot going on.
Yes. Yes.
Do you speak French?
I used to speak fluently when my grandmother was alive.
Okay.
And then when she passed, I just didn't really practice it. And my mom is fluent, but we are just not in the habit of speaking it. So I understand a lot of it still.
Nice.
And I'm always curious about whether if I move
and you might
to
dive
France,
back in.
if it comes back a little bit, but no.
I'm sure it will.
No.
So as we mentioned, you worked with Mia Michaels. You're her assistant at just 15. Like, how crazy is that? Let us know how that came about. And over the years, you've grown into a leading director and a Tony Award winning collaborator, doing it all. Yes, ma'am. At what moment did you stop seeing yourself as someone who helps others shine and begin claiming your own spotlight?
I love this question. I feel like I don't know that I've ever stopped feeling that. In whatever hat that I'm wearing, it always feels like I'm in service of something else. And that's sort of like a catchphrase these days, in service of, but really truly, I do think that, if I'm a performer, then I am, hopefully in service of the writer or in service of the choreographer or anything like that. If I'm in the associate position, then I'm hopefully supporting not just the director or the choreographer, but also
the performers,
the whole production and the performers, and and then the same thing if I'm actually directing or choreographing. I feel like I'm in service of, whether it be the other creatives or the producers, but also, maybe in service of something like bigger and more expansive as well. So I feel like that collaborative essence and that idea of wanting to help others shine is not something I've ever stopped doing. It's just a different version of that.
You're a servant leader.
I guess so. I guess so. Is that a thing? Is that like an actual term?
Yeah. I talk
that.
about
I love that.
I was, anyway, I'll tell you later. Okay, you were in the original cast of both Wicked and 9 to 5. So those are two very different shows that took creative risks. What draws you to projects that push boundaries, something, and have something important to say? Wicked is phenomenal. It's been 20 plus years.
Yeah.
So it has, a lasting impact. Like, how do you, what draws you to these projects?
Yeah. I mean, I wish that I could say that
I needed
projects were just on the table and and I could just pick and choose things. That's certainly a goal of mine, is to be in that position. It's like a multi-layered question for me. I think that, well, first of all, I didn't choose them. They chose me in my case.
Okay.
And I really believe, as cliche as it sounds, that everything happens exactly as it should and for you, not to you. And so I can connect the dots backwards and say, oh, these things were in my path because they taught me X, Y, and Z. And so, with Wicked, I had never used my voice before. I had never been in a position where I was being asked to use my full instrument. I had, up until that point, worked primarily as a dancer.
Got it.
And so I was only using sort of and I say only as a very general term, but I was certainly acting and having to use other skills that I just wasn't aware I was using.
Right.
And then Wicked was the one that exploded me into, my brain being curious and wanting to understand, I really enjoy being able to be multifaceted and sing and act and, think about story and think about everything in just like a bigger way. And we were really lucky to have a director like Joe Mantello who really grounded everything in truth and purpose. So I feel like that one show chose me because it's what led me into everything that came after that. And then I also like to be a little sort of like woo and esoteric. I think that on some level, we attract the things that we see in our minds to a degree, right? And so I feel like the projects, again, this is like connecting the dots backwards.
Right.
Like like I said, I wish I had like, I could be like, I'm going to do that one because, but I think that I have in a strange way called towards me the things that I've wanted to either explore or support, or the things that I'm curious about. For a really long time, to use Buena Vista as an example, for many years now, I've been saying I just want to be a part of something that feels like home to me, and that feels like my heart in a cultural way, because I haven't really been a part of shows that are traditionally like I did In the Heights the movie, but I didn't do In the Heights the show. I've never done West Side Story.
Right.
I've like all these shows that are associated with
your
and I was
culture.
always so like jealous of like my friends that were like having cafecito and like in the community and with other people and speaking Spanish and doing the thing. And I was like, oh, I really want that experience. And
and it happened.
And then it kind of happened through a series of events that I couldn't have orchestrated when I really think about it. And so I think that there is a certain level of like alchemy and magic in how we put ourselves out there and what we focus on. That there's an old saying, what you focus on expands. So I really believe that that's part of it too, that I have unknowingly chosen things and they have simultaneously chosen me, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and you talked about having a supportive director. So with Joe and Mia, it's great. I went to a screening of Sinners the other day, and the actors were talking about how the director was always just like, so like if he had something to say, he would come over and he would speak to them directly as opposed to yelling across and showing complete respect. So the fact that you've had so many people be so supportive for you makes life, your career, your life as just a little bit easier, a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel. I mean, it's complex sometimes.
Yeah. Oh, of course. Yeah.
I've certainly had mentors that, like in any business, there's relationships can be really complicated, and so they can be very supportive while also being maybe not so healthy in some other ways, and that's part of the learning process too.
And learning how to navigate it.
And so certainly, I think when someone is in a leadership position and they are able to bring out the best in you by showing you that level of support, but also by connecting with the purpose of it all and grounding you in that, I think is really, it really makes a huge difference. But sometimes I find anyway that in my experiences, it can come with a lot of extra. It can come with a lot of like, the things that we all battle with, like whether it be ego or insecurity or fear or,
and that's going to be with any job.
That's going to be with any job.
Any project,
so having to navigate that, to your point, like has been a huge part of the learning process. And so, I do think that I've been very lucky to have incredible sources of inspiration and empowerment and, artistic growth and all of that. And simultaneously, I feel really lucky to have had they're not so good sides that we all have show me about things like grace or what maybe not to do or try to do better, or have that be mirrors of like, oh, how can I evolve that if I'm in that position? How can I treat that a little bit differently? And I've had to do a lot of work, I think, around how do I, not to be super deep, but like, forgiving those moments that feel,
and not taking them
in a creative
personally.
process, what I mean? Like those are really vulnerable processes. The creative creation of something is always one that can be combative in some ways.
Right. And learning how to navigate through that is part of growth.
Yes, 100%.
So you were associate director with Othello, with Denzel Washington and Jake Gyllenhaal. What did it mean to help shape a classic text for contemporary audiences, especially one dealing with themes like racism and jealousy and just power and so many different things?
Yeah. I mean, for me, working on Shakespeare was like, that's another, going back to your previous question, like that's another moment where I feel like I've been calling that to me for years and years. What a lot of people don't know about me is that, even though I was known for a really long time as a performer that does musical theater and dance and, all of that I've actually been, diving really deep into, acting and directing. And so it's been something that's been on my radar for a really long time. And it's been I wouldn't say an uphill battle, but a challenge to have the industry kind of wrap their brains around the idea that you can do more than one thing.
Yeah. They put you in a box sometimes.
Yeah. And especially those of us that start as dancers first, there's this weird, it's getting better, but there's this weird.
She's just a dancer.
Yeah.
She's just a dancer.
Yeah. Or like dancers don't do X or, it's associated with background, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it has this like weighted connotation that is tricky to sort of teach people to see you with other skills and with other talents. And so for me, for whatever reason, Shakespeare, it's like, it's the thing, right? The sort of like the what am I looking for? Like the
pinnacle,
kind of like the pinnacle or like it's just highly respected and something that, is considered, if you've done Shakespeare, then it's like a stamp of some kind.
Stamp of approval,
which is kind of silly, but I just, and I just happen to love the work. Like I just think it's
beautiful,
fascinating and complex and gorgeous, and it's just beautiful. So I really wanted to work on it. And so for me, on a personal level, working on Shakespeare on the highest stages of Broadway with,
Come on.
giants, like absolute legendary icons.
Yeah.
On a personal level, like I'm still kind of trying to digest that it even happened.
Yeah.
And then from a professional and artistic perspective, I feel like, the world we are living through some interesting times, to say the least. And I think that it's a product of sort of a growth spurt, I think, for civilization. And I think it's all coming to a head, and we can make some choices for better or for worse, right? And so we're asking ourselves a lot of questions. We're having to go through a lot of more than challenging, I would say, horrific things that are happening in the world. But there's also so much hope and so much beauty and so much to live for and fight for. And Shakespeare, especially Othello, when it talks,
drama.
the cautionary tale around the seduction of power and greed, and what happens when you become infected with a thought or a feeling like jealousy, and you let it fester, and you don't have your eyes open. There's like so many themes. What would you do for love? Can love blind you in some cases? Can your sort of singular vision about one thing blind you to what's actually there? There's so much to discover there, and it's so rich.
So were you trying to like stick to the original, or and how are you tweaking it to bring it into?
I mean, Kenny Leon, who's the director, always works on material from the perspective of what does it mean now? Like, what does it mean to audiences now?
Yes.
And so we worked with the actors, but also with Shakespearean dramaturg, who's brilliant, around, how do we shape it? Because, the original is hours and hours long. And so nobody ever does like from beginning to end.
Right.
You do end up sort of editing certain sections and tweaking it a little bit. You obviously can't change like the words entirely. It is what it is. But we did sort of craft where the focus for Kenny was. Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. And always with current times in mind. Like, what are we trying to say? Even down to casting, Kenny put a lot of thought into, ethnicity and like feeling. I love that he was talking often about, what does he want the women to be like in the world that we're creating? Because and it's just one of many things that he was talking about, but how do we make sure that they're not just Shakespeare was written at a time where gender was treated differently, and so but he also, I think, wrote a lot of incredible, juicy things for women.
Definitely ahead of
they
his
were played by
time.
men. I mean, that's a whole other like DC dive. But I really loved that Kenny wanted to make sure that the women were powerful and that the women weren't just sort of reactionary or working from a place of things happening to them, and instead that they had autonomy and that they
empowering
made choices. So there was a lot of thought that went into things like that hopefully reflected out into the audience in a way that they could see themselves in.
Right.
And the goal is always to have people walk out and have conversations. Like, you don't have to like it, but if you're talking about it and you're saying, I disagreed with this, or I liked that, or I related to this, then that, I think, is successful.
Yes, and showing empathy for everyone's story. So simultaneously, you were working on Buena Vista Social Club. Okay, which is crazy. You are a Tony Award-winning co-producer on Buena Vista Social Club, right? Beyond the obvious cultural connections, right? What did you see in the story's potential as a Broadway show that made you want to be involved in this project? I mean, we kind of touched upon that earlier, but let's dive a little bit deeper.
Yeah. There were a few things with this one in particular that I felt right off the bat like I resonated with. One is I've been a fan of the album for decades. And I know that it was a real phenomenon when it came out, and I love the documentary, and so I think it started there with the idea of like, oh, this music, this material is
fierce,
really spectacular and singular, and I loved if anyone hasn't seen the documentary, it's just really beautiful that these artists were recognized later in life, sadly, but the way it all came about. And so there's that. There's the obvious cultural, like, I grew up listening to this music. Like I said, it feels like home. It's just like an immediate, for me, visceral sort of connection. And also, I had never really, I couldn't think of another production or another play that to me felt highlighted Afro-Latino culture, in that way, like
right.
direct from the source, like right to it. So it felt very authentic to me. It didn't feel like inspired by or, second or third or fourth generation. And so that was also appealing to me, and then as I dug deeper into it, obviously the people involved, I think Oren is a spectacular lead producer. So is Barbara Broccoli and John Stiles. So that team already, I knew that we were in good hands with them. I felt like the musicians respect. I had, when I first learned about the show, I was doing dancing on Broadway, and I had purchased tickets to go see it. But I was sort of like, it was winter, the off-Broadway run, and at the Atlantic. And because I was doing that show and it was really just taxing on me in every way, and it had like just, I think it was winter. Anyway, my mom and her Cuban boyfriend were coming to visit for Christmas.
Not the Cuban boyfriend.
Cuban.
Ow.
Yes. So they were coming to visit. And because I was so busy with the show, I wasn't able to get her like a gift that I was really excited to get her and whatnot. And so I had these tickets. And I thought, oh, this is perfect. Yeah. I'm just going to give them the tickets. And then I'm going to buy tickets so that we can go like later. And well, sure enough, I gave them the tickets. Several things happened. Her boyfriend came back. This is, a very traditionally Cuban, stereotypically Cuban person who shows emotion, but not necessarily like vulnerability, and came home and was like tears and dancing in the aisle. And like, so that kind of, I remember thinking like, oh, wow, if it had an impact on a person like that who's from there, like, I can't wait to see it. My mom came back raving about it. Everyone in the community was raving about it. So I had that in the back of my mind. And then I couldn't get tickets after that. Every time I went to get a ticket, it was sold out. I think they extended it twice.
Right.
And both times I went immediately to try and get a ticket and couldn't. So I was like, there's something there.
Yes.
But I thought I had like missed the boat entirely. I didn't know that it was coming to Broadway. I had no idea that was happening. And then when the opportunity presented itself, it was like I was putting all those pieces together of how I felt personally about it, what I would be excited to see supported on Broadway from a cultural perspective and an authentic perspective, the team who was involved, and then also just this idea that like, well, something really great happened when it was like the test product, right? So it was the perfect storm of things for me.
And you guys, you have to see this show. It is amazing. Like I always say they should open up the aisle so that you can just dance there, because from the very start you are like, I got to get up. And and the songs are in Spanish. So you don't even notice that. And when you hear it, you're like, I know this song. Like it's so familiar. And like you said, it feels like home, even if you're not Latino,
Yeah. And I think that that's what speaks so beautifully to, there was a lot of conversation around do the songs get translated or not? And that's why I think
I'm sure that was
it was such a beautiful decision by the leadership. And part of why I also wanted to be a part of it is that I was hearing about all of these different decisions that were being made that really made me feel like the material was being approached from a very sensitive and respectful place. And I felt like had you changed the language, you would be robbing it of its essence in a way. And everyone, when they walk out of there, everyone says it doesn't even matter because it's not a show that you need to know the word. It's not traditional like other Broadway shows where the songs further the story. These are songs that are weaved into the story. Yeah. And so you don't really need to know exactly what they're saying. You just need to be able to feel them. And you really do, I think.
So I guess that was another show that you did that had risks.
Oh, yeah.
9 to 5 with Dolly Parton. And, like.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Okay. You work as a dancer, actor, director, producer, activist. You're doing it all, Miss Honey. How do you navigate the different power dynamics and creative languages of each role? So, you're in different positions. And
Some days I don't really know, to be honest, and some days it's not pretty. And I certainly drop balls and hats often, but I would say that like being really clear about what the responsibilities and goals of that hat are, and sort of like the hierarchy of each position is always really helpful because, I think what happens sometimes, or what I've witnessed happen sometimes, is that you can be in a project and then someone who maybe has been a director in the past is now an actor, and then they come in and they bring their sort of like director hat into the actor position in a way.
You like stay in your lane for this particular.
Right. It's like in a way that is devoid of, and I hate to say hierarchy because I think that's just like a weird thing. It's not really hierarchy. It's more a lane, I would say. Right. And so it's like, okay, there is an art to communicating what you know from wearing the other hats into the hat that you're currently wearing.
Right.
So it's not to say like, don't share what you know as a director or what ideas you've had in those experiences to the table, but how you share them and when you share them, and, being clear that it's always like to go back to service, right? Like to be, that there's like a bigger goal than just like me and my idea and what I know.
Yes.
Like, because a lot of the time people come from that place of like, I know
things. More than you.
Yeah. Or I have an idea which is all really great. But if it's not sitting under the umbrella of how I can be useful or helpful to the room, like you have to know the temperature of the room, right?
Yes.
And be in that space of listening more than talking. That to me is something that I've had to learn over time. Like, how do I juggle all of those things while being in different projects? Now, how do I juggle them like in life is tricky. Like, you know, how do I, take on a contract while, putting energy towards a different lane, or, that I'm still trying to figure out, if I'm honest. All I can say is that I try my hardest to be organized in my, like, literally organized, but also like internally organized, so that I can try to take steps daily that lead me in the directions that I need to the best of my ability. Sometimes, I'm not gonna lie, it's overwhelming. It's sort of like a tornado of things that are all happening at the same time. I'm a mom too, so that like it, sometimes I drop balls, and part of it is also learning that like it's okay. Just
and don't beat yourself up about it.
Like just pick it up again, pick up the ball, like it's all right, So I don't have a clear answer other than I try to take the steps that I can take in a way that feels healthiest, to be able to accomplish all of the things that I want to accomplish, while maintaining some sort of like sanity and peace.
And sometimes you have to pull in community and get help from others. You have to make a plan and check in with yourself and see what's possible.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
I love it.
And sometimes it's a fail, and that's okay too.
Yeah. So I'm sure there's a lot of challenges when you're working on various projects that we talked about. When a project looks impossible on paper, what's the first 10% you solve to make the rest possible?
Yeah, that I think it depends on the hat, right? So for me, it always goes, the very first thing is like, pinpoint the challenge, like get specific about like, what is the challenge exactly? So that there's a clear roadmap to how to overcome whatever that challenge is. And sometimes there is no clear roadmap, but there's at least like a creative way to help solve whatever it is that's in front of you.
Right.
Like as an example, as a director, it usually, if there's like, let's say, if I see something problematic in the writing, let's say, where the writing needs some tweaking, it's not quite there, then, I mean, I happen to think this is important, or the most important thing anyway, but the cast. Who am I casting? Like, who are they? Collaborators? Are they smart? Are they able to look at a script and pinpoint, this isn't working because let me, and be open to collaborating. So it's like, that's one way to solve what is it that we're trying to work on in this particular stage of any particular project. If I'm a dancer or an actor who is in a room that feels like dissonant or out of, where things are feeling just a little like off for whatever reason, then, I start to think about like, all right, well, is this a time for me to be like the cheerleader and bring in that kind of energy? Or is this a time for me to be quiet and peaceful? So I think it depends. Every challenge is going to be different. And I think it just really starts with like, what is the challenge and how can I be helpful in solving it and finding solutions? Like, I think most people forget that they can be part of the solution, and get sort of like bogged down by the whatever the problem is, right? Like we can so easily, and it becomes like really infectious. I've seen it where it's like suddenly we're just focusing on the problem and what's wrong, and like
instead of pushing through,
instead of saying like, all right, this is what it is, and then let's fix that. Let's find a solution around that. And it's not always necessarily easy, right? But I think that that's a better entrance into something. Finding the right squad, finding the right people,
you don't want to
creating the right energy.
You don't want to work with someone who's going to make the day long.
Exactly.
That's the hard part.
Yeah. I think that, establishing an environment of like flow and ease and joy, to me,
it's a skill too.
It's 100% a skill and a focus, right? Like, and I happen to think that like as, I mean, I was going to say as creatives, but really for everyone, I think if you are in a state internally of, and I hesitate on saying this, like if you're in a state of abundance and in a state of like removing obstacles, and it's a daily practice, a yearly practice, like it's not something that I think is...
It's learned.
It's learned, and it's also not something that is always sustainable all of the time, right? It's like a practice that you have to constantly, at least for me, I don't know about anybody else, but it's something that I constantly have to work on. But when I started to approach my life from the perspective of seeing like what's possible, and editing out the things that are in the way of that, things just became more free, more joyful, more abundant. And I think that is true about any room, whether you work in corporate America or whether you work in a theater.
Yeah.
I think that creating an environment where people feel heard, respected, where everything is solution oriented, it doesn't mean that there aren't going to be stumbles or obstacles or problems, but that the general vibe of the room is one where people can feel free to be an asset to. And so when we give people that, I think that level of support, and that level of like autonomy and I just think everyone brings such special gifts to the table that when we silence those gifts or when we silence voices, then the problem just gets bigger and the room gets tighter and the room gets heavier, and you can't go anywhere in any situation that is stuck or stagnant. Yeah.
You have shared stages with some legends like Paul McCartney, Dolly Parton, Ben Vereen, right? But you also perform for underserved communities. Which audience has taught you more about yourself as an artist?
Some of my favorite performances have been, on Broadway, we do performances for different types of groups.
Yeah.
And there is one performance that's often done that is, I believe, for people and maybe even specifically children with sensory issues or autistic children or, or people who are normally not able to experience shows, performances, and things like that, because they a lot of the times like they're what's considered quote unquote disruptive to like a normal audience, where they might make sounds or they might have outbursts, or they might be sensitive to certain lighting or sound, and so it's always so exciting to be able to be performing for those audiences because they're so
they're in tune.
Real. Yeah. Right? Like they're uninhibited, and they are so, and their families, I would say too, because their families don't get to have some of these experiences
with them,
or even share these experiences with them, because they're, talk about like inclusivity, right? Like they're not included in those spaces. And so those performances are always really special to me because there's a really pure sense of community and shared space that is very like free and welcoming and exciting, and like there's just this like vibe in the room. I love those performances, and I love the performances where it's like student matinees are also especially if they are underserved communities, because it's filled with the same energy of like they're so excited to be there, and they don't take it for granted.
No.
In the way that a lot of audiences, I think, that are used to coming to the theater or are used to having these experiences.
Well, it's also something new for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they're just really
for most, it's like their
open.
first time ever being on Broadway, and you want to make that a great experience for them.
100%.
One of my classmates from high school, Dr. Bilal Polson, he brought all of his fifth graders to see Buena Vista Social Club.
Oh my God.
And he was like, Tracy, they loved it.
Yeah.
So it's like new eyes and new experiences. So
and then it makes them, then you have the opportunity to not only, hopefully share something that makes an impact on them personally, but you're also building a new audience.
Yes.
And you're hopefully inspiring them
new
to
audience
come
that
again.
will appreciate Broadway in years to come.
Yeah. Or any artistic format, right? Like if they had a good experience at that theater, then maybe they'll go to the movies more instead of watching Netflix, or maybe they'll go to a gallery and see it with new eyes, or maybe they'll, write something and feel like they
create
have something to
of
say.
their own.
Yeah. So I think it's a really beautiful experience, especially for those people who don't normally have access.
Storytelling is so important.
Oh my gosh, I would argue one of the most important things. People say, gosh, we hear this all the time, and I understand why it's said, and I get it. This idea of like, well, we're not curing disease or whatever, like that's
but still changing lives.
But it's very much, I think, changing lives, and I would argue that it does to a degree. I would go as far as to say it might save some people. I've gotten that feedback from people that say
it's therapeutic.
It really did save my life.
Yeah.
I was thinking this one way, and it gave me hope about this one thing, and then that triggered this other series of events. I mean, do I think that like one performance is gonna like suddenly give a 360 to someone? I guess it's possible, but I think it's more about these micro changes and these micro shifts of thought and energy that I think collectively and over time do really make an impact and do really shift culture and make change. And I would argue that it does, in a sort of like more expansive way, it does save lives. So I think storytelling is like such an ancient form of healing and community, and a way to reflect ourselves to one another, that I think it's like 1,000% vital to like our existence really as a society. And so when it's, I'm taking a little bit of a tangent, but like when it's threatened or challenged or taken away in any way, I think that we need to be vigilant and aware, because without it, without seeing ourselves represented, without exploring ideas, without talking about them, without reflecting, and having space to do that as a collective or as an individual, I think
we fail to grow.
We fail to grow, and we, I think, can be easily manipulated and fall into like some desperate things. Yeah. So I think it's vital.
It's so important.
Yeah.
Speaking of childhood, can you share a small moment from your childhood that still influences the decisions that you make today?
Oh man, there's so many.
You can share more than one if you want.
Yeah. And they might not be like what's expected. You know, I feel like growing up on the ocean was something that I hold deep. And not something I think about consciously necessarily. Like, it's not like I'm making decisions based on that. But I do think that like there's something about growing up in that environment and everything that comes with it that it's almost like I know what it feels like to be connected. And by connected, I mean like, you know, it's like what surfers talk about when they're just like connected to something bigger than themselves, whether you're a religious person or not. It's just this like idea of I know what that feeling is. And so I'm constantly in pursuit of that sort of like grandeur and that sort of like, you know, universal connection to one another that I think for me came from the joy and the peace and the nature of like living in that space.
Was there any moment when something happened that made you know that you wanted to be a performer? Or I know that you started when you were 15 working with Mia, but was there anything in your childhood that was like, this is where
there's a couple of things like to think about it from that perspective. Like, you know, I started in baby ballet in Puerto Rico, but I eventually ended up going to the conservatory there, which was run by these really incredible Russian teachers. And there's two things that come to mind when you ask me that question. The first thing is that when I went to that conservatory, which is El Ballet Nacional de Puerto Rico, so it's like the National Ballet School there. It used to be, I don't know if it's still there, but it used to be up on this like really picturesque hill. Nice. They would like train paso finos, which are these like horses that dance in the sort of like lower part of the hill. And I just remember being there, and there were so many things about that experience that I that really like shaped me wanting to do the thing. And it's something that, again, like I wouldn't really be able to know unless it was in retrospect, but it's like there was a magic to that place. I think the location was idyllic with the horses and the hill and the whatever. I remember the older ballerinas in their like beautiful sort of tutus that felt very I don't know, like romantic to me in that space. There was something about like the way that space was built. Yeah, and it felt very, and then the way they would talk to us and they would teach us how to like basically do surgery on the point shoes, and I don't know, there was just something like that I felt was very magical about that, and that magic certainly made it something that I wanted to do. Now, ironically, I ended up, when we moved from Puerto Rico to Miami, I ended up sort of like not pursuing dance for a minute in that transition. And I don't really know why necessarily.
How old were you when you moved there?
I think I was like 11, 12, something like that. But that as a base, right? And then moving to Miami, and we went to this performance at a place called Bayside. And it was like this outdoor performance. And it was sort of like, again, like connecting the dots, like I don't believe in coincidences kind of a thing.
Right.
We ended up randomly at this performance where Mia was performing with her company at the time. And it was serendipitous, you know. But what I do remember is that I was immediately like, that, whatever that is, whatever I'm experiencing,
you gotta have
now,
it.
like I have to have that. And I don't know what that is. And so I remember telling my mom that I wanted to perform again, and she was like, okay. And then we were new, to the city. So she was just like asking her friends, like, she wants to go back to dance. What's a good dance school? Do you know whatever? And so I, again, serendipitously ended up, I'll never forget that we were in the sort of lobby area. It was like this tiny lobby area of this studio. And the way it was designed is that there were 2 studios back to back. There was one in the front and one in the back, kind of like a railroad in New York. And the door was closed, and we were at the front desk, who later I discovered was Mia's mom at the desk. It was her father's dance studio, but my mom was inquiring about me taking classes there, and and somebody opened the door, and Mia at the time had these very long, like thin braids to her waist.
Okay.
Which was, very unique at the time because she's a white woman with blue eyes and blonde hair. She's beautiful, but she had these long, very long braids, like box braids. And I remember that the door opened and she was teaching. She was in the middle of the room. She was sitting on the floor. I'll never forget it. And I was like, ugh. Like it just like took my breath away. And I remember going to my mom and I was like, this is it.
Yes.
Whatever you're asking about,
right.
This is like where I need to be.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything. You know what I mean? I was like, I didn't even think I would be in class with her, but I just like somehow knew like this is where I'm supposed to be. And then sure enough, like little by little, I went into a class and then one thing led to the next. And then I was, in the junior company before I knew it. And I was working with her before I knew it. And she just really like took me under her wing in many ways. And so that was like sort of like the beginning of it. So those 2 moments, I think the magic of where it all kind of started, like, and how
unicorns.
I perceived it. Yeah. Yeah, these unicorns. Yeah. Oh my God, totally. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. So the entertainment industry, it beats you up sometimes. It's notorious for its instability and rejection, right? What keeps you resilient?
I think like being in the constant practice of working from the inside out is what has kept me like up when there's a valley, but also grounded when there's a peak. And there's this like famous quote that I think, or something that like Oprah used to talk about all the time that I think I've mentioned to you before is, you have to, if you're gonna like take the good, then you also have to take the bad. Meaning like if you're gonna take the accolades and this like belief system that like you're fierce and like you're amazing, then you also have to accept that you're not, and that you also have to take the critiques. And so therefore, because of that, I try not to take either, right? I try to keep everything very clear in purpose and keep myself and my instrument sort of grounded from the perspective of like, well, what am I here to give, right? And what am I here to do versus, and yes, of course, like there's a confidence and a sort of like acknowledgement and a patting ourselves on the back that has to happen. I'm not saying that we shouldn't sort of like treat ourselves with loving kindness and acknowledge the things that are our special gifts, but also to not like believe the hype while we're doing that.
Yes.
And that when you see that in everyone else, when you can see that that you have gifts and that others have gifts and that we all like can share in that space together, then I think it eliminates this idea of like competitiveness or, lack or, so I think it's a long-winded way of saying like, I've had to do and continue to do a lot of work on what all of those things mean from the inside out. So versus doing things externally to juggle all of that and be resilient, I think that for me, the answer has always been in working the mind, body, and spirit daily. It's like a daily practice, and it's messy and it's complex.
If this episode could coax one tiny change out of someone that's listening or watching, what would you hope they do this week?
Really just thinking about what's the obstacle in your way of doing the thing that, and maybe it could be something as small as like naming the obstacle, like to really give, okay, here it is. if someone gave themselves the permission to take the time to slow down and name one thing that's in the way of getting to the other side of something that's going to make them personally feel more expansive, joyous, full of light, something positive, then to just name that in an effort to get closer to clearing it, I think that would be amazing, because that to me is like the very first step.
Yeah. So they have to figure out their block.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And give themselves permission to stop, right? Because I think we're just like, my God, the current society and current culture is just so hustle oriented. And, I find myself sometimes, like, at the end of the day, I look around and I'm like, where did that day go? Where did the week go? Where did the year go? Right? And I think it's like a conscious permission that I have to give myself that, like, no, it's okay to sit down and journal for 10 minutes.
Yes.
Like, I used to do that when I was younger, and suddenly, like, I just don't, because I don't have time to do that. I have to, but it's like, that is the work, right?
Yeah.
That is giving yourself the moment to think about that at
and
its
recap
most basic.
What's going on.
Yes, also that. And review, like, I think is, reflect on that is also important. I don't know if that was one thing. That sounded like 50 things, but good luck.
It was great.
Good luck, everyone.
You got this. You know that we end each episode with a quote. Is there a quote that has stuck with you? Anything that's actually changed the way you think about something? Or
Yeah. Okay. So I have a few, but this is my favorite one.
Okay.
Of many. At least today it is.
Okay.
Sometimes I have my favorite
The
changes.
quote of the day.
Yes. Rumi is one of my favorite Sufi poets. A candle loses none of its light by lighting another. That's one of my favorites.
Well, we have to repeat that one.
Yeah. A candle loses none of its light by lighting another.
Yes. There's room for everybody.
There's room for everybody. And also there's what I like about that is that we can often feel like there's not enough, or like if we give away some of our joy, some of our light, some of our like, then we won't have enough, and or we won't ourselves shine, or to put it in terms of like the artistic business, right? Like sometimes I think there's this competitiveness that's born out of like feeling like if I give you props, or if I tell you you're doing well, or if I support you, if I run lines with you, if I help you with your self-tape, if I whatever it is, then
you'll excel more than me.
Get the job instead of me, or whatever. Right. And I think that the more we share our light, the more our own light grows.
Yeah. And no one can take anything away from you that's meant to be yours.
That's right. And then the way I view it is like that image to me of lighting another candle. It's like if I light someone's candle and then they light another candle and then that light lights another candle, then we've got all this light in the world, right? So I almost see it more like a duty to do that. I love, one of my favorite writers is Ralph Waldo Emerson.
Okay.
And he said, imagination is not the talent of some men, but the health of every man. And I love that too, because it speaks to just...
So it's important for us to keep imagining what can happen. Because there was a video where someone was like, you have to, when you go to bed each night, you have to envision what it is that you're wanting, but be specific with it so that, it will eventually come to light.
Yeah. And I 100% believe that, like, you have to be able to, like kids, right? Like, allow yourself the possibility of something and really explore imagination in general, right? Like, imagination is how we problem solve. Imagination is how we create. Like if Steve Jobs didn't have the imagination that he had, he wouldn't have innovated the way that he did, right? And so I just think imagination is something that we lose over time if we're not careful. And being a mom and having a kid, it's like I see how easily we do it when we are allowed to do it and when we are in practice of doing it, and how anything and everything is possible from that place.
Mm-hmm.
And then my last one is also from Rumi, and I think it's just gorgeous poetry, but tear off the mask, your face is glorious.
Ooh.
Isn't that beautiful?
Just be you.
Just be you. And, you know, be vulnerable and allow yourself, you know, to not hide behind these ideas, you know, and they don't even need to be like pretenses, but just these like concepts, like that we're sometimes like indoctrinated into culturally or with family or whatever. It's like, don't hide behind any of those things. Like you yourself, as you are,
you're enough,
are more than enough. Yeah.
Be perfectly imperfect.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.
It was. And thank you. Keep breaking through because we are just getting started.